Hi, Christy, KO3. You joined and you get a wave because you are the first person to join Wham Live. Story Media, you're the second. Blue Zones joined. Chicken Dog 13. Waddy's Ats also joined. Gucci Brendan joined. Wave Carl Bendix joined. Ronnie Brissett Yoga joined. Hello, hello, hello. Sandy Yee Kapoor joined. Samara Metz joined. Alzheimer's Fight joined. Miss Indiana, Miss somewhere else, Carrie Beam, Chicken Dog. Thank you all so much for joining Wham Live today. Thursday, you made it to Thursday. Good for you. Bravo for all of us. I'm super excited to be hosting Wham Live. What is Wham Live? It's the Women's Alzheimer's Movement Live. It's a way to bring the work of the Women's Alzheimer's Movement to life for you. It's a way to bring, I hope, new eyeballs to the work of the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. It's a way for WHAM to educate you about brain health. It's a way for WHAM to educate you about what Alzheimer's is and isn't. It's a way for us to bring our work to you. And hopefully, if you like what we're doing, you'll spread the word about WHAM. So I also just want to begin by thanking everybody who contributed to WHAM. Yesterday was Giving Tuesday, and so many people contributed to WHAM to help us continue doing the work that we do. We fund gender-based research. We're trying to understand why 2 out of 3 brains that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's belong to women. Nobody knows why that is. WHAM is trying to answer that question. We're also on the forefront, educating women and their families about brain health, about women's health, about Alzheimer's prevention. And all of that is a full-time job, which we all undertake with passion and purpose, because we believe that we can wipe out Alzheimer's once and for all with your help. We believe that we can fund the research that might be a part of figuring out what this disease is and isn't. And we believe that we can do a part in helping you live longer and better and healthier lives. That's why I'm super excited to be, that our guest today is Dan Buettner, who wrote this great book. I did a story on the Today Show on it. It's called The Blue Zones Kitchen, 100 Recipes to Live to 100. And Dan and I are friends. Dan is a best-selling author, an explorer, a journalist. He is the man who brought the whole concept of the blue zones to our attention, where people live the longest and the healthiest. And once we did actually a couple stories on the Today Show on this, and Dan went on the Today Show and he cooked some of the recipes from this book. He spent years traveling to all the blue zones, getting these recipes, writing them down because they weren't written down. They're old-fashioned recipes. And then he put them in this beautiful book for all of us to get: chickpea soup with lemon and herbs, beautiful ulipoki, cinnamon rice, bean soup, fried green tortillas, yuca cakes, you name it. And he really believes that we can come out of this pandemic healthier than when we went in. He thinks this is a big reset moment, a reboot moment. Oh, how do I join? So you just request, Dan, you request, and you just say Blue Zones, and then I add you, poof, like that. Hopefully, no, waiting for Carl Bendix. Nope, I'm waiting for Blue Zones. So you asked me again, Blue Zones, here we go, add. I'm adding, I hope my friend Dan Buettner, who's holed up in, there he is.
This is my first time. I'm an Instacast virgin at all this.
Oh, I'm so glad to be your first. I'm thrilled.
And by the way, it's a thrill to see you in your natural habitat. You're normally Today Show, big lights, cameras, celebrities, and here you're at home. It's fun to see you. It's like a normal person.
A normal person. Well, I have to say, almost the last time I saw Dan, I ran into him in church.
Wasn't that fun?
Parents. He had brought his parents down to Florida to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary or something.
Yeah, 60 years.
60 years, and I saw him across the church, and I was like, that can't be Dan Buettner down here in church in Florida. And lo and behold, there he was with his parents, who he had brought to celebrate their 60th anniversary, and they were looking healthy and happy. And I was just like, oh my God, how did they do that? But that's a different interview for a different time.
Yeah, I'm very lucky.
You're very lucky, and we're really lucky that you're coming via the Blue Zones today. I was just saying before you came on, Dan, I was talking about your book and the story we did on the Today Show. And then I was reading some pieces from the Blue Zone where you said that you think this is a really important reboot moment for all of us, that you think we can actually come out of this healthier than when we went in. How so?
Well, you know, our food environment now, the way we're eating as American, is nudging tobacco out as the #1 public health killer. And so much of it is because of the way, you know, we eat, the standard American diet. Right. You know, every time you go out to eat, you consume between 200 and 300 more calories than you would if you just ate at home. And those calories tend to be laden with sodium and saturated fat and sugar and so forth. I think, yeah, okay, I'm very sensitive. A lot of people suffering. A lot of people are worried. You know, people have loved ones who are sick. They're, you know, they might lose their job. But for most of us, it's a forced vacation, and it's a chance to relearn the art of cooking. You cook, it's an activity for your family. If you find a few dishes that you love, especially if they're whole food, plant-based, we know they can add years to your life. We know they can reduce your chances of getting Alzheimer's disease. You know, according to Gallup, I wrote this book. You also covered for the Today Show, the Blue Zones of Happiness, on the statistically happiest people in the world. I know that 70% of Americans don't like their job. So that means 30% of only 30% are showing up and actually liking it. Well, this gives us a chance to refocus our lives, and you know, maybe, you know, our job won't be there, but maybe it's an opportunity to think about something that lines up better with your passions and your purpose and your skills. And
so Dan, so many people, millions, like 25, I think was the last time, million people have lost their jobs. Millions have no idea where their next paycheck is coming from or where they're going to put food on the table. One of the things that I always admired about what you're saying is that a lot of the foods that you're talking about in the Blue Zone kitchen and that come from the Blue Zones are inexpensive foods. And they were developed by people who had very little money, and they were meant to last a really long time. So talk about what someone can get out of a book like this if they've lost their job, they don't know where their next paycheck is coming from, and why they could eat like this that might be healthy for their family, and it can actually be really economical and good for their brain.
So I think it surprises people to hear that people living in the Blue Zone, the statistically longest lived people, all make an income that would put them below the poverty line in the United States. So it really kind of rebukes this notion that you have to be rich to be healthy in this country. You know, we spent 2 years to do a meta-analysis, a worldwide average of what these places were eating, and then we went back up into the villages and the back roads of places like Okinawa and the highlands of Sardinia to see what they were really eating. And they were eating a peasant food diet. They were eating mostly whole grains, rice, corn, and wheat. They were eating greens. A lot of them are things that sort of grow in your backyard, and they, you know, stuff we'd weed whack and throw away, they're putting in salads. Nuts, which aren't all that expensive because they're very satisfying. Tubers, you know that in Okinawa, the longest lived women in the history of the world, about 70% of their dietary intake until 1960 or 70 was sweet potatoes, purple sweet potatoes. They're cheap, they'll last, they're pantry friendly, and you know, a few recipes, it's easy to make them taste delivery. I'll give you a quick 2-ingredient longevity recipe with sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes and a can of coconut milk, and you mash them together, and your kids will love it. You'll love it. It's got healthy fat. It's got complex carbohydrates, beta carotene. Take you about 5 minutes to make. Your whole family will love it. But the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world, beans.
Beans.
All these places. And, you know, you and I spent a week together down in the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica. What were they eating down there, Maria?
Yeah, corn tortillas, beans, more beans,
That's
nuts,
right.
some greens, beans, greens, nuts, and corn tortillas.
But the secret is they know how to make these simple peasant foods taste good. I tell people the most important ingredient in any longevity recipe is taste. So the idea is you not, you know, force yourself to eat kale and tofu. If you don't like kale and tofu, that book you're holding in your hand, we went through about 400 recipes before we found 100 that taste delicious. And these old women, and it's really women who are the keeper of this 500-year-old eating tradition. They, through natural selection, picked out the best tasting recipes so their family will actually eat them. So it's beans, nuts, and grains, but also making them taste good.
That's really, and there's a lot of those kinds of recipes that are in this book, which I said before you came on was really painstakingly done over several years. And Dan and I worked together on the Alzheimer's Task Force here in California. And part of really, I think, what drives you to write books like this and to discover the blue zones, to talk to people, is to bring this information back here to the United States and tell people that the way we're living is making us sick, is impairing us cognitively, and that you're also very good at explaining that it's the food is one part of it, right? But if you want to have a brain healthy diet and way of life, you've got to do more than just eat properly, correct?
That's right. It's an interconnected cluster of characteristics because, you know, people every year they get on a diet, and on average by about January 18th, the vast majority of people are no longer on that diet. They get on the diet, you know, after the holidays. Trying to change your behavior does not work for the vast majority of people. What does work is shaping your surroundings. So people in the blue zones, they're eating mostly a whole food, plant-based diet. They're not running marathons. They're not lifting weights, but they're nudged into movement every 20 minutes or so because they live in walkable communities. They have gardens out back. They don't buy a mechanical convenience for every little bit of work. Their lives are underpinned by purpose. They tend to surround themselves with 3 or 4 friends who are active and are eating a healthy diet and care about them on a bad day. And they live in places where the healthy choice is the easy choice. And in blue zones, these people are making it to 90 or 100. And you and I also did a story about Ikaria, Greece, which is this island off the coast of Turkey, actually, that has the lowest known incidence of dementia. There may be a place that's lower, but it's probably 1/5 the rate of the United States. That's not because they have better genes. It's not because they're eating some mysterious supplement or because they're on a hormone therapy, or because they have better discipline. They live in an environment where the healthy choice is the easy choice, where a whole food, plant-based diet is easiest. Every trip they take, occasions a walk. They don't have the social pressures of loneliness.
Yeah,
all
that
these
was
things
one
are
of the other
connected.
things. Yeah, that somebody here said they also dance and they're in community. That's another article that's on the Blue Zones, which talks about, and we've talked about that at the Alzheimer's Task Force and stuff, the negative effects of isolation. And we're hearing that a lot in this pandemic. People who are living alone, people who have social distance and are really lonely and are struggling, and how negative social isolation is for your brain and your body, right? And that one of the things you do, you go around to cities around the country and try to implement this way of living in local communities.
That's right. You know, I think, you know, about 70% of Americans are obese or overweight. And you know what? In my opinion, it's not their fault. Since 1980, the number of obese people has tripled. And I don't really think Americans have changed. I think our environment has changed. It's so hard to escape empty, crappy calories. It's so hard to walk places in a lot of America. So what my team does at the Blue Zone Project is we work with city governments to make cities more walkable, to help change policies that favor farmers markets and city gardens, and curbing junk food marketing and the ubiquity of junk food. So we're kind of creating the architecture of decisions so that people can kind of turn off their brain in these cities, and their decisions naturally are going to be about 20% healthier. That's what makes a difference. In Fort Worth, Texas, we worked there for 5 years with Texas Health Resources. We saw their BMI, or their obesity rate, drop by 6% when the rest of Texas got healthier. And that's because in a comprehensive way, we changed the defaults and set up nudges so that people move more, ate less, socialized more, knew their sense of purpose, and put that purpose to work. That's what works.
You said it actually allows people to turn their brain off. I say it actually allows people to turn their brain on, because the effects of when you're eating healthy, when you're moving, when you have purpose, when you have other human beings in your sphere, you're alive, right? That makes you come alive. So if people are out there and they're like, I want my community to be a Blue Zone project, I want that in my community. There's nowhere for me to walk. There are no healthy places. I don't have a farmer's market. How do they get in touch with you? Or they have parents that they're concerned about who might have Alzheimer's, but it might be mild. Where do they get in touch with you? And how difficult is it to have the Blue Zones come into their communities?
Well, I think we're broadcasting from Blue Zones. You can just message me right here on Instagram, and we'll get back to you. But it does require, it only works in cities where these are publicly supported. So the mayor and the city council and the chamber of commerce and superintendent of school have to raise their hand and say, yes, we want to change around here. And they're privately supported. So it's usually the hospital system or the insurance company, because typically we have to hire people, a team of about a dozen people for 5 years or so. But it's only then, when you have this sort of maniacally focused team, that is in there making sure restaurants, there's 30% of restaurants are healthier, and schools are a little healthier, and churches and workplaces and city governments aboard. And then, to your point, Maria, 15% or so of people come in and take our purpose workshop and volunteer, and we put them on what we call MOI, a committed social circle. And once
explain that, Dan. Explain the MOI, because you talk a lot about that, and I think people obviously don't know what it is. They don't know that term. I did not know it, and I think it's really good, especially now when you might be having to stay at home. I've been at home. So many millions of people at home. Having a MOI is super important to not, for your mental health, in addition to your physical health. So explain that concept for people.
We borrowed the concept of MOI from Okinawa. So in Okinawa, when you're 4 or 5 years old, your parents would put you with 3 or 4 other 5-year-olds. There'd be a ceremony and an expectation to travel through life together. So, and when things go well, you take care of the other people in this circle, this MOI, and you share. But when things go south, you can expect that your people in this MOI to support you. I met 5 102-year-old ladies who belonged to the same MOI for 97 years. They got together every night, drank sake, gossiped, argued about that hot guy back in 1941. But it was a delightful thing to see. Loneliness in this country, if you're lonely in this country, is as bad for you as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Shaves about 8 years.
Say that again. Don't run over that, because when you first told me that statistic, it blew my mind.
Yes. So if you're lonely, and the definition of loneliness, Maria, is you don't have at least 3 good friends you can call on a bad day.
Yeah.
So if you're isolated, if you feel the stress of, I don't have anybody who really cares about me, it shaves about 8 years off of your life expectancy compared to somebody who's got at least 5 friends. It is really damaging. My good friend, the former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, just wrote a fabulous book called Together. It just came out last week. If you want to know about nobody pays attention because marketers can't sell you a farmer. But if you could distill the social connectivity in a pill, it would be a blockbuster drug. But yet we pay so little attention to it, and it's especially now when we're forced to stay home. But if I may just inject a little opinion into this, I was really sort of anti-social network. I was anti-Twitter, anti-Instagram. Here I am, anti-Facebook. I wanted people, I want to sit down at a table with you, Maria. I'm sure everybody else here would love to sit down and look you in the eye and have a human contact. But I'm actually finding that conversations like this, and especially Zoom, we now have the time. We now have something to talk about. We're not just monkey brain busy like we are in normal time. I actually think reaching out to a loved one and having a connected conversation really starts to get at some of that loneliness, toxicity that you can overcome it with things like Zoom.
I think absolutely. And I've been doing that, connecting with my family, most of whom are back east. I love doing these conversations because I feel like I can see you and we have a relationship. And I think, but there's so many millions of people, Dan, who live alone. And certainly when you think about aging in this country, when we think about people living alone, and we know that depression is a fast track to Alzheimer's. We know that loneliness increases your chances for Alzheimer's. We know all of these things increase your chance for Alzheimer's, which is why we've been stressing at the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, pick up a phone, call someone, call your parents, call your, aunt so-and-so, or somebody who was good to you at some point. That really is a health call. It's a very powerful act of service to another human being, right? So,
and for yourself.
And for yourself.
It's a two-way thing.
It's a two-way thing. You're absolutely right. And I think what you're really trying to say to all of us everywhere you go is that we can do better. We can live longer. We can have better cognitive health if we take a page from these blue zones. And it's about the food, right? It's about connecting. It's about purpose. It's about movement. It's about something higher than yourself. It's about a mission, right? It's about all of the things you're talking about in the blue zones. It's not just one thing. If you go and eat grains and nuts, that's not going to be enough.
Yes. So, you've honored me by inviting me to join the governor's task force on Alzheimer's, and you guys are doing this fabulous service, I think, at trying to come up with the best ideas, not only for a cure, but treating all of the people who treat Alzheimer's patients. But also, I think I'm sort of a loudmouth prevention guy. And I would argue that between 50 and 75% of Alzheimer's is preventable. There's some debate on that, but certainly we've seen in blue zones, it's been mostly preventable. But we miss the point that the same things that are driving heart disease and cancer and diabetes are also driving dementia. Right. And if we would just take the time to realize that what we eat and how we connect and the environment we choose to live in, and knowing our sense of purpose and living that, these are all things that fight a whole grab bag of chronic diseases. And by the way, our hair is on fire about COVID-19. COVID-19 has killed 50,000 people. It'll probably kill a lot more, but that pales into comparison of the many millions of people guaranteed to die this year of a chronic disease. Yeah. So it's all interconnected. Your great work with Alzheimer's is also addressing in an indirect but important kind of way your chances of not dying of COVID-19.
Yeah, I think, as you say, all of these things are interconnected, right? And what's also super important is the importance of investing in research. I think this moment exemplifies how important it is to invest in something that might not give us an answer today, but it will give us an answer maybe in a year or 2 or 5 or 10 years, and that will change the trajectory of people who come behind us. The Women's Alzheimer's Movement is funding research into women's brains, trying to understand why is it that 2/3 of all the brains diagnosed belong to women? Sometimes people say to me, well, that's sexist. I said, no, it's actually smart, because you go where the majority of the cases are, and that research will benefit all of us. So if you empower your brain, you'll change your life and you'll change the lives of other people. But we sometimes have a hard time in this country, I think, investing in things that'll pay off down the line.
Yeah,
we want it now.
Yeah, we have no problem spending billions of dollars this year on trying to treat somebody with Alzheimer's, a woman with Alzheimer's disease, where the return's about a 16x. So a dollar invested today in your initiative here will probably pay off 16x over time on a disease that you will not have to treat, a case of Alzheimer's you will not have to treat down the road. So, realizing that the problem with America's healthcare system is we wait for people to get sick, and then we try to fix them. And it's very hard to fix it once the damage is done, whereas some well-placed funds ahead of time can keep the pain and suffering from happening in the first place, and the expense.
There's some people on here. A woman said that her mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 69, therefore she's eating really healthy now. Someone else is asking, is it about being vegan, gluten-free, or that's really, you're not recommending kind of whether it's vegan or paleo, you're really recommending to take a page from our ancestors.
Yeah, if you look at, I mean, vegan is not a bad way to go, but if you look at the way the longest lived, healthiest people in the world, including the United States, the Seventh-day Adventists, they're eating mostly a whole food, plant-based diet. Meat about 5 times per month, low sugar, about a quarter of the sugar that we're eating. So essentially that if you have to pull a wrapper off of it, think twice about eating it. If your grandma...
If you have to
well, I mean, that's a slightly oversimplification.
Wow,
but,
actually, everything I eat, I'm pulling a wrapper off. That's really bad.
Well,
really,
I'll tell you, one of my greatest professional triumphs, Maria, was to get you to eat beans. When you were over at...
That's right. I have to say, I want to say this because I told Dan when I went to do this story on his Blue Zone Kitchen book, I don't eat lentils. And he said, it's a really good source of protein. You should eat it. That's what the ancestors did. There's a lot. I said, I don't eat it. And he gave me a bowl. I told him not to tell me what it was. And it was delicious. And I said to him, what is this? And he said, it's lentils. I eat lentils now all the time. And so that was, as a direct result, that actual recipe that he made me is not in this book, but it's lentils and brown rice. He did it very simply. I now eat it a lot thanks to him. And I think that's really what you're trying to say with this book, is that if we want to live well and long, and if you live long, you want to live well, and you want to live well cognitively and physically, what we're putting in our mouth really matters, and how we're living day to day, how we're moving really matters.
That's right. And by the way, I'll tell you what, even though the recipe's not in the book, I will post Maria's beans on Blue Zones. I'll put the recipe on there. I shared it with you. I will put it on there. And everybody listening right now, you will be a bean convert, and you'll thank me in the long run.
So I want to thank you, Dan. Dan has obviously he's coming to us from the Blue Zone account on Instagram. He has his own account, Dan Buettner. He is an explorer, a writer, a filmmaker, a friend, an author, an advocate, an activist. And the Blue Zone projects do come into communities. So you can rally your faith-based community. You can rally your local mayor, your city council people. I think we've also seen the importance of local officials during this crisis, how important it is to have good representation at every level of the government, because the government actually matters. And in schools, you're working in schools to bring this kind of food at a younger age. I mean, I wish I knew when I was really young all these things. When I was really young, I still kind of am, but getting kids to eat this way at a young age really helps you live a much healthier life to a later age.
Well, I tell you, mothers out there, your children's taste in food is solidified by the time they're about age 3. So if you can get them try eating plant and enjoying plant-based, but you know, there's only one taste that you're born with, and that's mother's milk. All other tastes are acquired. So whether you're eating barley, beef, or beans, this is something that your mother teaches you. So mothers, you want to give your kids a lifetime gift of health for their lifetime. Feed them whole plant-based foods when they're very young, before age 3, and they will carry that for the rest of their lives.
So a lot of people saying, I'd like to have the Blue Zones in my community. I would like to have Dan come to my school. You can go to the Blue Zones account. There's a whole Blue Zones project. You can reach out to them there. You have to build a coalition. You have to make them want to come to your community, but they do come. If you build, so to speak, if you build it, they'll come, and then they'll build more with you, which is, I think, a really exciting thing.
Yeah, we don't have a marketing apparatus, or people invite us in, and we find that we can't build a Blue Zone in a city that doesn't want it. So we make really sure that they're ready, and they're really tired of living in a toxic environment, and they're ready for a team to come in and change the food environment, the built environment, the tobacco environment, and the social environment, so the healthy choice is mindless. It's easy.
Okay,
Setting Americans up for success.
So I think people should go to the Blue. They're asking how to promote this. And this is, we don't know, we don't have a cure for Alzheimer's. We don't have a magic pill for Alzheimer's, but we do know, I want to really stress this, we do know that your lifestyle impacts your brain. We know this 100%. So if you're worried about Alzheimer's, and I don't know anybody who isn't, if you're worried about your cognitive health, and I don't know anybody who isn't, people who are 30, 40, 50 and beyond, one of the things you can do now to empower yourself, empower your brain, is to follow food recommendations like this, to move. You don't have to go join a fancy gym, just move, get a sense of purpose, build a community, have a higher purpose, reach out to people, share your life, be in community, and just remember, your genes are not your destiny. Just because you had a mother or father with Alzheimer's does not mean you will get Alzheimer's. And if you don't have Alzheimer's in your family, it also doesn't mean that you're home free. So we all have a brain. We all have to do everything we can to protect it, nourish it, feed it, grow it, empower it. And that's really what, and research it. That's what WHAM is trying to do on a kind of scientific and research level. And that's really what's behind Dan's quest, is to understand why these people who live in these areas do it so well, and what can we learn from it, right?
Beautifully said. You should be on TV. I think
know.
you might pursue a job in like journalism, or you're so good.
I want to say something else. When I invited Dan to come onto the governor's task force, he said, I'm not a task force kind of guy. And he's been almost the best person on the task force. So that's another lesson. If you think I'm not this person, or I don't do that, do it anyway, because you might end up being the best person that community has. So if you think, I've never used my voice to bring something like the Blue Zones to my community, try it. You might be really good at it. Okay.
Well played.
All right, Dan, I hope when you get out of staying at home, you'll come back to California, and you'll finally come over and make that bean brown rice recipe.
Oh, I got a couple recipes for you.
Okay.
All right. I'm giving you a huge, and your audience, an Instagram hug here, a virtual hug. And
yes, we'll do that. And follow Dan. Follow, if you can, the book. They have great articles on there, and they're all about your health, your cognitive health, your spiritual health, your physical health, your mental health. And together, we're going to wipe out Alzheimer's. Thank you, Dan.
I love you guys. We'll see you when you're 100.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope he's right. Okay, I want to thank Dan Buettner for joining us on Wham Live. He was terrific. He's so inspiring. So I hope you found that conversation helpful. Wham has a weekly newsletter. It's called the Wham Weekly. You can go to Wham, the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, and sign up for our newsletter. You can stay here on Instagram. You can follow us on Facebook. You can continue to support us. And we will bring to you every week the brightest and the best, the people that are out there on the front lines, and they will bring you information that will help you today in your life, help you live healthier, help you with your brain health. So remember, empower your brain. It will change your life and the lives of other people that you love. Brain is connected to the body. Empower this, train this, feed this, nurture this, and everything benefits. Okay, have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.